Good evening, everyone. My name is Eric Eichhoff, and I serve as the Associate Director for Alumni Relations at John Carroll University. Thank you for joining us this evening for our next installment of A.C.E.S, the Alumni Continuing Education Series. A.C.E.S was established in the spring of 2013 by the Office of Alumni Relations in the spirit of lifelong learning. The program offers enrichment opportunities for alumni and friends through the expertise of members of the JCU administration, faculty, and alumni community. As a result of COVID-19 and our inability to connect with all of you in person, we have moved our programming online. Over the past 6 months, we have heard from experts on ethics and leadership, the political and economic impact of COVID-19, racial equity and social justice, space exploration, the brewing industry, and the women's suffrage movement, just to name a few. Tonight, we will learn about resilience and reinvention during challenging times. It is now my pleasure to introduce our moderator for tonight's program. Jennifer Gardner graduated from John Carroll University in 2003 with a Bachelor of Arts in Political Science, and from American University, Washington College of Law in 2006 with a Juris Doctorate. Jennifer went on to practice in various law firms in the Cleveland area in both litigation and contract matters. She is currently an associate at Gallagher Sharp, focusing on general litigation and appellate advocacy. In the years between graduating from law school and the present day, Jennifer has not only practiced in various areas of the law, but she has also taught at Cleveland Marshall College of Law, started her own consulting business, worked in social media, content creation, and written freelance articles for various local publications. Jennifer spent 6 years on the board of the John Carroll University Cleveland Alumni Chapter, including serving as president of the chapter, and is currently a member of the John Carroll University Alumni Association Board. She also writes her own popular Cleveland lifestyle blog, Authentically CLE, and is a room parent for JZU PTO. She and her son Jeffrey and dog Toby live in University Heights. Jennifer, thanks for joining us tonight. The show is yours.
Now we can, wait, you're muted.
Okay. Resiliency, right? Okay, it's fine. We're showing you right from the start. All right. Good evening, fellow alumni and guests. It's a pleasure to be here with you this evening. As Eric mentioned, the Alumni Continuing Education series was designed to provide meaningful, relevant, and original programming for members of the JCU community, and tonight we intend to do just that. As we all know, lives and careers are far from predictable paths. They are filled with twists and turns that require resiliency in the face of challenges and reinvention to adapt to changing times. Tonight's conversation will focus on the importance of resiliency and reinvention in the workplace and their value in navigating uncertainty in the midst of the pandemic. It is now my honor to introduce Jill Kovas-Johnson. Jill Kovas-Johnson is the Director of Strategic Initiatives and Director of the P. Kelly Tompkins Leadership and Law Program at Cleveland Marshall College of Law at Cleveland State University. Jill is a lawyer who graduated from the University of Michigan Law School. She is also a volunteer ambassador for John Carroll University and supports a variety of activities and initiatives involving students, alumni, faculty, and staff. She loves to exercise and recently learned to play golf. Jill is an avid reader and belongs to 2 book clubs in Cleveland and tries to keep up with her Ithaca and Boston groups when possible. Jill and her family are big sports fans. Jill is married to Michael D. Johnson, president of John Carroll University. They have 3 sons, Alex, Andrew, and Thomas. Good evening, Jill.
Hello, I'm so excited to be here with you.
Same. So let's start off by telling us how you landed in Cleveland.
Well, Jen, my career journey has taken several twists and turns. Life really intercedes in such unexpected ways. So I'll give you a little bit of background about me. I was born and raised in Michigan and always thought I would grow old there, near my friends and family. As you mentioned, I'm a lawyer, and my first job after law school was in the office of the general counsel at Ford Motor Company in Michigan. I worked on proxy statements, business contracts, some litigation, and eventually I moved on to teach business law and business communication. Then came the call from Cornell University in Ithaca, New York. And my husband, Michael, had spent 24 years at Michigan and then became a dean at Cornell, where we stayed for 10 years. Eventually, I landed a role building an engagement program for key new hires and then also managing the dual career program. And next we were on to Boston. Michael became a provost at Babson College, and I worked on cross-college collaborations. And then it was on to Cleveland. Michael landed the job he always wanted at a faith-based institution when he became the first lay president at John Carroll. Networking led to a job for me at Cleveland Marshall College of Law, working on strategic initiatives and the leadership and law program.
Wow. Well, that's quite a journey. And I think, you've had a lot of career changes in that time. So what were one or two of the bigger challenges you faced in your professional career?
Well, Jen, I would say there have been two main challenges. First, as a dual career spouse, finding a role for myself in every place we've lived. And secondly, living in 4 states in about the last 13 or so years and building a new community every time. So I'll talk about each of those separately. I knew it was important as the accompanying spouse every time we've moved to find a role for myself, not just to meet people, but to find something interesting and meaningful to do in my community. Our first big move was from Ann Arbor to Ithaca, and that was during the 06-07 timeframe when the country was in a recession. So many employers had hiring freezes. There simply weren't many job opportunities. So I remember thinking, how am I going to repot myself during this challenging time? My 3 sons were all busy in school. My husband had an exciting new position. So I began networking and volunteering in the Ithaca community. I want to make a note here that many employers have dual career support for accompanying spouses or partners looking for work, either a formal program like Cornell has or informal assistance. And these programs are really designed to help with networking, informational meetings, job referrals. So I encourage anyone who's facing a change like this to ask about dual career support. So eventually I took a part-time temporary role in engineering admissions at Cornell to get my foot in the door. This led to a role in human resources where I created an engagement program for key new hires and then eventually managing the dual career program. Networking led to my role at Babson College, working on cross-college collaborations. I was working with Wellesley College, Olin College of Engineering, and even some work with Mass General Hospital. And then when we arrived in Cleveland, I met a couple of John Carroll people who really helped me connect to others in the community, and it blossomed from there. One connection led to many others. And my second challenge was building a community. So my recommendation would be, really, you have to put yourself out there and try new things. Each move or career change is so challenging, especially when you're leaving a place where you have great friends and colleagues. But you learn with each change and with each challenge that you can successfully land somewhere. It really just takes meeting 1 or 2 people to help you. So 2 women I met very early on, even before we actually moved to Ithaca. Both helped me make connections. One I actually met on the internet. And as I was looking at schools for my sons, she was listed on the website as the PTA president. So we had an email exchange, and it turns out that she went undergrad to Michigan. So we have become longtime friends since then. And another I met during the hiring process after Michael was offered the job at Cornell. She is a lawyer, so we had that in common. Both of these women helped me meet so many more once I landed in Ithaca.
Well, that's great. And that somewhat segues into our next topic, but to sort of talk about some of the professional challenges for myself too. And you were talking about reinventing yourself and finding something for yourself as you move to different places. For me, one of my bigger challenges was taking a step back from practicing law when my son was born, because I wanted to spend more time at home with him, but I also wanted to stay active and needed to find a way to sort of reinvent my career that gave me the flexibility to be at home with him, but also still have something for myself. And that's when I started my my consulting business and sort of took some of the soft skills that I had as a lawyer, and you're well aware of ability to critically think or to write, take some of the soft skills and use them in a different way. And so I think for me, that was one of my bigger professional challenges, was taking that time to sort of step back, but then also believing in myself enough to step back into the profession when I was ready to, and my son was in school full time.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. I mean, some of the lessons that I've learned is finding a job is a full-time job, as you know yourself. And COVID has created such uncertainty in all of our lives.
Yes.
So when people ask me like, okay, how did you overcome these challenges? What lessons have you learned? I say, think broadly about new opportunities. What really interests you or might interest you? Be open-minded and flexible and plant lots of seeds, because you never really know what's going to bloom into a potential role for yourself.
Exactly.
And sometimes to open a door, you have to take a lesser role than what you were hoping for.
Sure.
And if you are able to consider part-time, full-time, project-based work, or even temporary roles, I think all kind of help you get your foot in the door and find a role for yourself in every new community. I've always found that every time we move, it's a chance to pivot and think about some new opportunity that I might be willing to try, especially now with COVID and so much is work from home. It allows you to really explore opportunities beyond your own community. So I think that's really important. And of course, as you and I were just talking about, identifying transferable skills, looking at your resume and the various positions you've had, and what skills have you used, both hard skills and soft skills, as you mentioned, things like accounting, financial analysis, marketing, project management, computer coding, data analysis are all really important hard skills. But soft skills are equally important: team management, communication, leadership, relationship building. So as lawyers, we're communicators, writers, counselors, advisors, critical thinkers. So in my case, it wasn't too much of a leap to say, I think I can teach undergraduates, or I can become a program or project manager. And so I think a lot of times when people are thinking about pivoting, it's really important to think through the roles you've had and how you can use those skills to launch into something else.
Absolutely. And to dovetail off that, we've talked about too, you and I have talked about just the need to believe in yourself, right? When you're applying for jobs and interviewing, the position that I have now at Gallagher Sharp, I frankly felt like I took a flyer when I applied for it. I had been out of the law firm setting for almost 6 years, and knew that I still had those skills, but wasn't sure how that gap on my resume would look, especially to a law firm. Mm-hmm. And they interviewed and they hired me, and I, went in there with full faith in myself, and I'm so glad that I took that risk, so to speak, of applying for something that might have seemed a little bit out of reach, but what do you have to lose by doing something like that?
I agree. Reach for something new and interesting, and don't be afraid to reach high, or for something better, right? And be your own advocate. When I was a young lawyer at Ford, I had come back from maternity leave, and I was in litigation, and I realized I wanted more work-life balance. But at that time, there weren't a lot of part-time lawyers, particularly in corporate. So when I asked to go part-time, the initial worry was about protecting FTEs and productivity. And as it turned out, there were many people at Ford across the company that were also looking for part-time, men and women, for childcare, elder care, maybe they had a sick child. So Ford created a part-time pilot program. I was one of the first women in it. And now, of course, they realize part-time employees are really very productive, cost-effective. So that was an example for me where you really have to be your own advocate.
Absolutely.
And one other thing I want to mention that's really important as you're thinking, when I think about lessons learned, is build your skill set. And do you need to take a class or a seminar or to learn or brush up on your skills? Do you need a license or a certification? Perhaps it's a good time to finish that degree you've always wanted to do. And so many things are offered online now. And I've often find that as you keep learning, it builds your confidence. And I don't know if that's been, you've recently had the job experience. Maybe you want to share how it was interviewing during COVID.
Yes. So right, when we're talking specifically about resiliency and reinvention in this time that we're living in, so I actually interviewed in person in July. So everyone was wearing masks and social distancing and all those niceties that you think go along with an interview, shaking someone's hand or reading their expressions. You really can't do that in this time in an in-person interview. My initial interview was via Zoom, but then I had an in-person interview with a larger group. And even just, I can remember driving downtown for the interview and thinking like, no one's going into work. Like I'm going into an office building and who's even there? And it's just such an interesting time because I think some of what's happened in this time is that we're losing some of those social skills, right? And we're more interacting via Zoom for, for good safety reasons, but some of the social niceties break down. So it was definitely a challenge interviewing in a pandemic, but I would say to anyone who, is applying right now and does get an interview, first of all, just showing that you are responsible and following, wearing a mask and doing social distancing and things like that go a long way to speaking to who you are as a person. And everyone's in this weird position, right? It's not just you who's interviewing in an odd position. The interviewers feel odd. The other interviewees feel odd. We're all working in this realm right now. So I think just sort of leaning into it and doing the best you can with it. It's everyone's saying, it's unprecedented times, but it's unprecedented times to be applying and interviewing. But all that said, there are certainly jobs out there and there are people who are interviewing, and I work downtown and every day there are more and more people coming back to work downtown. So certainly if you're looking during this time, stay the course because there are opportunities out there. So one of the things that we started to touch upon was the importance of finding or creating a professional community, especially during periods of change, to sort of help you ease those transitions into either new living areas or new periods in your life. So Jill, could you share with us a little bit about how that's impacted your career?
Well, I will say the personal and economic stress caused by COVID is certainly shared by all those furloughed, laid off, and even those with jobs who feel uncertain about perhaps their duration. So what's really important is build your network, both personally and professionally. It's really critical. Every place I lived began with one person who connected me to others. And don't just expand your network with people doing work that you currently do, but expand it into ways that perhaps you want to pivot into new areas that you are interested in. And I do want to make a note about networking, particularly when we get back to in-person receptions. So many people comment that they really are not fans of networking receptions. And the reason is because you go into this large room, you don't know a lot of people. So I want to share a few ideas with you that may help make it a little easier when you're facing the next networking reception.
This is great because believe it or not, I'm one of those people.
Oh, really? Okay.
You would never. I do not enjoy a networking reception. So I'm
and they're very prevalent, right? So what I would suggest is you enter the reception room, you scope it out, you look around, see if there's anyone you know. It's okay to start there, just to sort of get more comfortable in that environment. But recognize networking receptions are really designed for you to spend your time meeting new people and reinforcing connections and relationships with people that perhaps have similar work, doing similar work that you would like to move into, or at firms or companies that you would like to move to. So let's say you go and you don't know anyone, which happens all the time. So I would say start at the food table. That is the easy way, as you're picking up a few carrot sticks, to start a conversation with someone very easily, very casually. And it's okay to approach people standing alone or in small groups, because that is exactly what a networking reception is designed to accomplish. So you may approach them and say, you see someone, I see Jen Gardner. Oh, I really wanted to meet you. So I approach you in a small group and say, Jen, I'm looking forward to meeting you. I'm Jill Johnson. I lead the Leadership and Law program at Cleveland Marshall. Tell me about the work you're doing. So you can ask open-ended questions and get to know people that way. And then, of course, after the reception, follow up with the new people you've met by a quick email, so that within a couple days, so that they become part of your network. It's worked for me. So.
Well, and I will say Jill is a master networker, because she reached out to me when she first moved to Cleveland, and that's how we ended up meeting and having coffee and getting to know each other. And so it's, you know, if there's someone who you think might spark an interest, you have something in common, I think, you know, just not being afraid to reach out to people. And as you have said, people are usually very willing to say, yes, I'll meet up for, you know, obviously a little bit different in these times, but meet up for a cup of coffee or
a Zoom call. I mean,
right, exactly.
And in your case, you have this wonderful Cleveland blog. So I happened to discover it and then learn that you were a John Carroll alum. So you were so welcoming when I reached out to you. So it was great. But I find that people are really willing to meet with you. And that leads to the next way that I think is really helpful to build your professional community, and that's arranging informational meetings. These are not job interviews. These are meeting people doing interesting work to help build your network, learn about the community and potential work opportunities. I have found people are always willing to meet for an informational conversation. It does lead to many more connections. I have never had an informational meeting where it didn't then lead to 1, 2, 3 or more connections after that. And what else is great is that it can help lead to resume and cover letter support and advice, and also helpful interview techniques. And in my case, since I have moved from Ann Arbor to Ithaca to Boston to Cleveland, it really helped me understand the local job and hiring market, and of course, job search assistance, because everyone you meet keeps you in mind if they learn of something happening or an opening at another company.
Definitely. And I will say, particularly John Carroll alumni, I feel like it's like a secret password. Like all you have to say is, I'm a John Carroll alumni, or I have a John Carroll connection.
Mm-hmm.
And that group of people is extraordinarily willing to help out, to take a meeting, to talk to you. So certainly don't be afraid to play on that.
Right. And join professional organizations too. And they are now having so many Zoom gatherings to network and meet people. And eventually all those will go back in person as well.
So for our younger alumni and students who might be joining us this evening, what are a few things that you wish you would have known when you started your career?
So one, embrace change. Change is really hard and scary. And I was very resistant to move from Ann Arbor at first. I just couldn't imagine not growing old there. But I took a leap of faith, and the benefits have been so great. It really opens your world. So changing jobs and moving helped me learn and build resilience. So whether it's personal or professional change or a challenge, you really sometimes have to dig deep, gather your strength, and make the effort to face that goal. And as we've talked about, life is definitely not linear. It doesn't always go in the path you plan in your 20s. It zigs and zags. And so you really have to be open-minded. And of course, don't be afraid to take a risk. Embrace new opportunities. Not everything will go as planned. So you dust yourself off and keep on going. For me, each move or job change has been really a new chapter in my life. It helps build your skill set. And of course, change teaches you that you can face challenges, that you can move and land successfully in new places with new employers. You can make new friends, new jobs, new traditions, and learn about another place in the country. I've made 3 big moves, and each time it's been easier to move or make a job change. The other thing I'd like to say for young alums, really for everyone, is cultivate mentors. Mentors can be a current boss, a former boss, a senior colleague, a family member or friend. In the course of my career, I've had a lot of different mentors. Each have helped in different ways, helped me learn new skills, try a new role, build my network. So I'd be interested to know who yours are, Jen. My first mentors were my parents. Mm-hmm. My dad encouraged me to go to law school and was always so supportive. And my mom was really a role model of a working mother in a time when many of her peers were not. She worked full time. She had 4 kids. She helped with homework. She cooked and cleaned and helped save money along with my dad to pay for my brothers and me to go to college. So when I was moving to New York, my mother was so supportive, even when her grandsons, who she's very close to, were moving farther from her. She would always say, home is where you are, Jill. And I live by that motto today. And of course, my husband, Michael, has been one of my biggest fans and is always very supportive of all of my career efforts.
Yeah. Well, I certainly, I would agree with you there. My mom has been a huge mentor. She actually got her master's in education from John Carroll in 1985. So at the time I was about 4.5 years old, and she was a single mom who was, going to school at night. And I can actually remember being at her graduation at John Carroll on the quad.
It's wonderful.
So certainly from that perspective, just the importance of education, of advanced degrees, of just really, and I think she started my love of John Carroll, like it always just felt baked in. So she's a huge mentor for me. But also one of my professors at John Carroll, Dr. Lauren Bowen, who is, she's no longer at John Carroll, she's at Juniata College now. But I had her my freshman year, and I switched her to be my advisor, and she was phenomenal all the way through. And so supportive of me going to law school and pursuing that career. And now my firm has a formal mentorship program, and my mentor is wonderful, and I will call him with sometimes the most random questions, but he's always willing to talk about that. But even just informally, some of our younger partners, I've only been there about 2.5 months, but have been incredibly warm and welcoming. And I think you can't be afraid to show what you don't know or to ask the questions, because they, again, are really, really willing to help and to guide you. I think people think lawyers are all very competitive and sort of backstabbing. And I, throughout from law school through my time practicing, have not found that to be true. And have found anybody that I've reached out to help have been just wonderful and willing to do that.
Yes. One other thing about for young lawyers, and really for everyone, is not to be afraid to reinvent yourself. Right. I think you and I have both done that.
Yes,
I never thought I was leaving Ann Arbor. My plan was to grow old there. Our sons were all born there. I have lots of friends there. My family was not far away. And then we moved to New York, where I did not have one friend in the entire state. Mm-hmm. I was from the Midwest. I moved to the East Coast. But it was such a growth opportunity. So our world became so much bigger. We've met really wonderful people, and every move that we've made has been a gift to our family in so many ways. So my takeaway from this is that the more you reinvent yourself, the more challenges you face, the more you learn and build resilience. In my case, I've been a lawyer, a teacher, an admissions evaluator, an HR professional, a cross-college administrator, and now a director at a law school. Yeah. And also, I feel like our 3 sons have become more resilient too. We moved our boys to Ithaca when they were in 5th, 9th, and 12th grade. And we are a really close family, which made it easier in some ways because we had each other. But it was also hard for them to pick up their life and move to a new city, but yet we helped them transition and we made new traditions, and that worked well for them.
Well, and I think to something you were saying, a lot of these points of reinvention in your career come because of changes in your personal life. And something that I was thinking a lot about is that your career and your personal life, and I don't think I knew this, certainly didn't know it when I first graduated, that your career and your personal life are really intertwined. I think we think they're supposed to be in these little boxes and they don't intersect, but they do, and one impacts the other. And I think what I've learned is that having people in my professional life who will be understanding and open and accepting of what's going on in my personal life, and having people in my personal life who will support my professional goals, both places are essential, and they are so intertwined. And so thinking that you can just go to work and have that be in that box and not have your personal life supporting that, and not have your career being understanding of what's going on in your personal life, it's not going to work at the end of the day. That's not sustainable. And so finding an environment that's supportive of both.
I agree. And I think more employers are definitely more aware of the interconnectedness of both, for sure.
Okay, so we have talked about some really important ways with, to build reinvention with and resilience, and how they can help, how that can help in both your personal and professional lives. But what are some of your biggest takeaways from all of this?
Well, first, I would say my life and my career have been really a series of chapters. Each job has been something different. And as I've mentioned, I've been building resilience while reinventing myself every step of the way. So if I had to think about some of the items that I have found to be most important, it would be building your professional network, building your skill set, identifying transferable skills, planting lots of seeds, arranging informational meetings, and that will end up being many of them, cultivating mentors, being open to change and not be afraid to take a risk. And 2020 is such an extraordinary time that people really need to take care of themselves physically and mentally. And sometimes that means asking for help. So those were kind of the ones that come to mind that I have used every time I've moved. Is there anything I'm forgetting, Jen, that you...
No, I mean, I think for me, the main things were being adaptable, which, we've talked about, whether it's, using soft skills and transferable skills that you have to sort of pivot into a different career, or just being open to maybe starting in a contract position or in a part-time position and being willing to see where that takes you. I think having that open mind and adaptability in your careers is always going to serve you well, and in your personal life too, as well. But also just believing in yourself. I talked earlier about interviewing for this job, that if you had asked me when I clicked send on the resume, never would have thought it would land where it did. But really, having that confidence to send in the resume or to take the interview, and to really reach for those things, because you never know. And I feel like even if you don't get a job, no interview is wasted. You're going to learn something from that. Maybe it's another connection. Maybe it's just learning more interviewing skills. Ultimately, you're building for yourself, even in the reaches that you take.
Yes, and the other thing too about sometimes reaching for something new or different, whether it's a new job in the same city, moving to a new city, a new state, facing the unknown and becoming acclimated can be unsettling. And so a friend of mine and a colleague about a month or so ago and I were talking about this issue. And we said, you really have to become comfortable in uncomfortable situations. And it's easier the more you do it. So in my case, having moved a lot, we made new traditions. We knew we weren't going to get back to Michigan or Wisconsin, where Michael's family mostly lives. We weren't going to get back for every holiday or birthday celebration. And definitely the unknown is scary because you are moving out of your comfort zone. But every time you face a new challenge, you're building resilience. And that really helps you adapt to more challenges, changing circumstances, and stress. So as you learn from each experience, that helps you move forward, you become more confident. Definitely resilience is not something that you're born with or happens overnight. It's certainly cultivated over time. So I've often thought about difficult situations that I have faced in the past and how did I move past those? What did I do or didn't do that helped me in those situations? And I would say try to draw on those skills and confidence when you're faced with unknown situations. And of course, put yourself out there. It's exciting to get to know a new community, a new city, explore new job opportunities. I started a book club with some friends in Ithaca and in Boston, really with women I didn't know very well, and have joined 2 book clubs here in Cleveland, which have given me the opportunity to meet people. You can join a club, a gym, learn new skill, and you learn new skills by meeting people. When we moved to Cleveland, we're foodies. We love to eat out at new restaurants and attend sporting events. And there's so much art and culture here that it was really great to have lots of ways to get involved in the community.
Absolutely. So we're getting some questions, both from people who are online with us now and some people who had submitted questions prior to the live broadcast. So we're going to dive into some of those now. Okay. But one of the questions was that my husband lost his job. I'm reading the question, I should say.
Okay.
My husband lost his job due to COVID, and my position at work was changed given expense management efforts. I have been really reassessing what I want to do and thinking about a complete career change, though I am nervous about doing so given our current income situation. How might you recommend I continue to pursue my interests while ensuring some stability for our family?
Well, first I will say I'm very sorry to hear that your husband lost his job. I know that must be very stressful for your family. And so my recommendation would be to stick with your current job for family stability, but start actively networking to move into the area of new interests. The economy is growing and stronger in some areas, things like healthcare and tech, home and auto sales, for example, but hotels and restaurants are struggling. So, but I am hearing of people finding jobs. So I am optimistic that if you really start networking in the area that you want to move into, plant many seeds, reach out to people, arrange informational meetings, and also look at your resume and the different roles you've had and identify the transferable skills that you have that you can pull out and use in this new area that you would like to move to. And if there's a mentor that you may have that you can confide in, that might be a good source of support for you as well.
Well, and I will say also, and to echo Jill, you know, I'm very sorry about, you know, your husband's position and being in this really difficult time of not only 2020 just being a tough year for everyone, but trying to job hunt and to figure out what's best for your family. One of the things I will share, and I know it was sort of mentioned in my bio, is that I am a Cleveland blogger, a lifestyle blogger. That was always a hobby for me. But when I started my consulting business and I was working from home with my, you know, with my son being 2 years old, I started to look at building out the blog more into a freelance writing opportunity. And so some of the contacts that I had where I would blog about an event for an organization, well, then the Cleveland Zoological Society ended up saying, well, we need somebody to write a couple of freelance articles for our magazine. So I think it's something where, you know, the question was about, you know, how do I pursue my interests, but also have some financial stability? I think it's something like that, thinking maybe a little bit outside the box. Is there, you know, I have a friend who is a yoga teacher and it's not her day job, but she teaches classes on the side and she gets paid for doing that. You know, creative writing was not my day job, but I was able to find through my connections ways that I could actually make money off doing that, particularly in a time where I was not in a traditional work setting. So I think just, again, that adaptability of thinking outside the box of what are my interests and how are ways that I can maybe take those and turn it into something, you know, everybody's got a side hustle these days, right? How can you take your interest and make it into sort of a profitable side hustle, especially in a time where traditional work opportunities might not be as accessible? So, okay, some other questions that we got. I'm curious about today's reinventions and the group and our thoughts on thank you notes for interviews in sort of this sort of new time that we're in.
So I think definitely you have to send a thank you note. If you've had a Zoom interview, an in-person interview, an informational meeting, an email thank you note is fine and much more timely than, I love getting mail by the US Post Office, but it takes more time. Where email thank you notes, you can write an equally thoughtful note and they can get it much quicker. I'll tell you a story about a college student we knew. Maybe this happened about 6 or 7 years ago. We were at a dinner and the student was sharing with us that everyone who had interviewed for a summer internship received an offer but him. And the only thing he could think of, and that apparently was later confirmed, was that he forgot to send an email thank you for the interview. So I think thank you notes are an absolute must.
Well, and having just interviewed, I will say I sent email thank you notes individually to each of the people that I interviewed with. And I emailed them because I knew, first of all, that they were on sort of a quick hiring timeline. So to your point, it was a lot easier to just send those and know that they'd get them before any decision would be made. And what's funny is I actually asked today, I posed the question to the people that I interviewed with, and it was sort of a mixed bag of whether you should or you shouldn't send. I shouldn't say should or shouldn't. To some of them, it didn't affect their decision making, but no one said it was a negative, right? And so to me, I would never want to the interview, the internship person you were talking about, I would never want to look back on an interview and say, what could I have done differently that might have put me over the edge? And that just might be my anxiety level, but truly, like, I think it's a nice touch, and maybe it won't make the difference in getting you the job, but it's certainly not going to hurt you.
Right, there's no downside.
Exactly. So I think even in this day and age, you do it. It probably is more of an email thank you note than it used to be, but I think it's certainly worth doing. Okay. This was an interesting question that we got in from pre-registration, and it was great because I think we learned something from this question. What tactics do we recommend for microburst learning to support a lifelong learner mindset? And I have to say, I think we all had to do some research on what microburst learning was.
Absolutely. So I will say microburst learning is learning in small modules. And it really depends. So instead of spending 4 years to get an undergraduate degree, maybe you already have that, maybe you want to learn a little more about statistics. So you take a seminar, or you go to a webinar, or a community, a course offered in your community. So I would say tactics for microburst learning really depends on the skills you want to learn, the interests you have, and the time and energy you have to devote to it. There are many options for learning, for lifelong learners. edX, for example, has free courses, LinkedIn Learning, TED Talks, podcasts, YouTube videos, social media feeds, websites. For example, Bill Nye, the science guy, has on his website home science experiments that you can learn science at home at your leisure. Webinars, and like I mentioned, short courses offered through your community.
Those are all great options. And like I say, I learned what microburst learning was. So we all learned something. We had a question from, actually, we don't have the name of who sent it in, but they'd like to know about our failures and sort of how we've built resiliency through failures. And I think we've talked a lot about how we've successfully pivoted, but what are some of those failures that we might have encountered?
So one of the examples that I think about is when I was teaching business law and business communication, I spent so much time preparing, over preparing, like an abundance of preparation, because I was concerned that I needed to understand and be able to answer every question that a student possibly had on the topic I was teaching that day. It was not efficient at all. I think I probably made about a nickel an hour by the time, really. So when I think about ways I could have done that differently, I could have perhaps spoke to other faculty that had taught the course before, or learned how to more efficiently prepare and present the material. It got better over time, but I remember that stands out for me as something that really was a learning curve.
Yeah. And for me, I think, you know, and I think over time I've learned to see it less as failures, or I've repackaged it as not failures.
Exactly.
But no, I had a couple places that I worked early in my career that I worked at for a year or less. And at that time, I think being transient in a job is more acceptable now than even it was back then. And to me, I viewed those as failures, as I should have either stayed longer, whether or not it was the right job situation for me, and whatnot. And so I think for me, I looked at those sort of early stop-start kind of jobs as being failures. And now I can see what they were teaching me, and about where I wanted to work and the kind of work I wanted to do and the kind of people I wanted to do it with. But I think, you know, for me, certainly that felt like failures early on, and it felt like things that needed to be explained away in interviews and things like that. So I think that's definitely taught me to sort of be resilient, to be able to stand up for the career choices that I've made and say, no, this is why my path is what it is. But that's the benefit of hindsight from it too. So.
For sure.
We also got a question from Sarah Snow. You mentioned that to get through these times, it's important to ask for help. COVID is a difficult situation. What else would you suggest to get through this? She also loves your book club idea, Jill.
So I think that it can be any health and wellness, personally, professionally, mentally, physically, right? For me, I recharge my batteries by being with friends and doing things socially and relaxing. So I learned during this pandemic, I learned to play golf. I'm still learning. I'm not really that good, but I love it.
You can teach me. My son took lessons, and maybe he could teach me too.
I love it. And so I feel like finding a physical activity to use some of your free time to release stress that everyone is under is really important, whether it's walking, golfing, joining a book club. I love to read. I have read lots of books during this pandemic. So that's another way that I have spent time trying to decompress and become less stressed. I work at Cleveland State. All of Cleveland State staff had to take a 4-week furlough this summer. And it was a little bit better because you were not in it alone. Everybody was doing it. But so I would say try to find something physical to do, walking, tennis, golf, anything. And also use things to expand your mind. For me, it was reading. And I've become a podcast person. I listened to Michelle Obama's podcast that she recently launched. And I also listened recently to Hillary Clinton's. I listened to all news. I'm a news junkie. I've been following the election. So while that can be stressful, it's also super interesting to me. So find things, yoga. I know you really love yoga, and I'm sure that's a way to keep your mental health very positive. So I think there's a lot of different ways. It's just finding what's right for you.
Yeah, I would agree. I've been fortunate. A lot of whether they be fitness studios or whatever are offering online options now. So there are ways that you can stay safe, but you can also still participate in physical activity or just taking walks, things like that. One thing I would suggest is faith-based groups. If you're not comfortable attending services in person, or if your faith is not doing services in person, there are a lot of online options now. There are a lot of, my family's facing some health challenges right now, and I've been able to find support groups that are doing group meetings online. So if there's a particular challenge that you feel like you're facing in this time, there's probably an online option that can sort of serve that need for you. And I would agree with podcasts and reading, but sort of the flip side of what Jill said is also just finding something that is like light and fun, and you can, you know, you can expand your mind and then you can turn it off for a little while. Like I binge watched Schitt's Creek. I think it took me a week, maybe, but just something that is light and you can laugh. Or my law school friends and I have started maybe once a month getting together on FaceTime. We're all over the country. We hadn't done that. You know, it's been 17 years since we met each other, and we haven't talked this much since we were in school together. So finding just ways to reconnect with people, even in this crazy time, I think really provides a great amount of support. And just sometimes it's just hearing that everyone else is in the same boat of like, gosh, the person I live with is driving me crazy and I want to get out of the house and I can't have a birthday party. And, you know, all those little things that are kind of eating at us right now, it's sometimes just nice to have someone to share that.
Despite the fact that many of us have Zoom fatigue, it's also been a wonderful way to connect with people.
Absolutely.
I have had so many Zoom meetings with friends in the different cities that I've lived in, which have been really wonderful. Yeah. And a wonderful way to relax and reconnect face to face. So I think Zoom, while we do a lot of it, has been a really wonderful way to start connecting with people again. So. Yeah.
And it shows you live when you do things like throw your pen across the room. Yeah. So, okay, also, Dave Vidito, our Director of Alumni Relations, would like me to segue into, since you mentioned golf, that the JC Alumni Golf Classic is scheduled for June 11th, 2021 at Sleepy Hollow Golf Course. But one final question for the night. It actually comes from, I think, someone who you may know, Tom Kobus, would like to know, how do you like living in Cleveland?
Yeah, this is one of my brothers. I have 3 brothers and I have 3 sons. So we love living in Cleveland. It is the farthest south we've ever lived. It is a wonderful—
I laugh every time you say that. I've heard it.
Well, it's true. It is a wonderful Midwestern city. We feel really comfortable there. It's filled with friendly people, and it's the biggest small town we've lived in as well. And I will say the John Carroll community is hugely supportive, filled with friendly people. And the other thing I love about Cleveland, and Jen, I don't need to tell you this since you have a hugely popular blog about Cleveland, is that there are great restaurants, arts, culture, and of course, sports teams. And we're a huge sports family. Yeah. So it hits all the marks for us.
Yes. And there are still a lot of, you know, to pivot into COVID land, there's still a lot of ways to experience those things. You know, the art museum is open with timed entry, things like there are places that are now open again, or there are places that are offering Playhouse Square as online options and things like that you can still take advantage. I mean, I'm a lifer, but I will agree with everything Jill said about Cleveland. It's a wonderful place. So I think that's, we got one more question. Jill, are you a Browns fan? This is from
I am definitely a Browns fan. I watch a lot of football teams. I will say, and I'm going to just hope people aren't cringing. I love Tom Brady, and he went to Michigan and I went to Michigan, so that's my connection. During the couple years we lived in Boston, were 2 of the years that the Patriots went to the Super Bowl. And of course, John Carroll has a tremendous number of alums that work for the Patriots.
I was going to say, John Carroll's got a strong Patriots connection. Yeah. So you should be okay in this group, sort of.
So I love the Browns. I love Baker Mayfield. I love watching them. I have a son, though, that is a scout for the Bengals, and I'm a huge Bengals fan, too. But now that Tom Brady has left the Patriots, I still root for the Patriots, but I'm also a Bucs fan. So, and I grew up in Michigan. I love the Lions. The issue is when you move a lot, you tend to have a lot of alliances. So my husband is a huge Packer fan. He grew up in Wisconsin. So, and I like the Giants too sometimes, depending on who they're playing.
All right, well, before we conclude, I'd like to share a few other opportunities for alums to take advantage of this fall through the Office of Alumni Relations. A couple of our next upcoming programs. On Wednesday, October 21st, Dr. Dan Kilbride, who I will say I had as a professor at John Carroll, and he's wonderful. He's a professor of history, and he will focus on how the history of Confederate monuments and how our nation reckons with that history. This program will explore the reasons these monuments were erected, how they have served as flashpoints in our society, and why there has been an increased call for the removal of these monuments in the wake of this summer's focus on social justice and racial equity. And then on Sunday, November 1st, JCU board member Father Mark Henninger of the Society of Jesus will lead us through a Visio Divina, which is an ancient form of Christian prayer in which we allow our hearts and imaginations to enter into a sacred image in silence to see what God might have to say to us. Father Henninger will guide us through prayer and reflection using various pieces of art, focusing on the lives of the saints and the beauty of life and resurrection as part of our All Saints and All Souls Day remembrances. And more information on these programs and recordings to the previous A.C.E.S programs can be found on our website, which is jcu.edu/alumni. And as a reminder, registration for any of these programs is free. So we thank you all for being here, for your questions. We hope you enjoyed the program, and thank you and good night.
Yes, thanks, Jen. It was great.
This is great. This is a lot of fun. Thank you.
Tonight.